What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Let's talk about the Russian city Putin pretends doesn't exist, unless he needs a patriotic backdrop for his next TV speech. Kaliningrad was supposed to be a success story, a gateway for trade, tourism, diplomacy, a place where Russia could show it was not just about tanks and pipelines. Instead, it became the perfect symbol of everything collapsing inside the Russian system. Things like arrogance, isolation, and denial. This region of 500,000 people, cut off from mainland Russia by hundreds of kilometers of NATO territory, now lives on borrowed oxygen. Every loaf of bread, every barrel of fuel, every medical shipment has to cross through Lithuania or Poland. And just one political argument, one sanction tweak, one customs delay, and that's pretty much it. Kaliningrad starts gasping. When Putin wages his war in Ukraine and pretends everything at home is fine, Kaliningrad is quietly suffocating. It's not just losing money or resources, it's losing its identity. The European Russians trapped inside the collapsing empire, and every month the situation gets worse. Prices climb, supplies shrink, morale collapses, all while world leaders hold their meetings, summits and military drills just across the border, visible from Kaliningrad's territory, but completely out of reach. This is not just a geopolitical story we're gonna be talking about in today's video. It's also a human one, mostly a human one. About a region that once looked west with hope and now looks east in despair. So today, we're going to talk about the Kaliningrad nightmare. The Russian city that Putin cannot save and doesn't look like he's even trying. And the one that shows us how far his empire has already fallen. Because the situation is getting worse and it requires our immediate attention. On maps, Kaliningrad looks bold, a sharp red wedge of Russia slicing into right NATO territory. In Putin's speeches, it is a quote-unquote unsinkable aircraft carrier. But let's strip the mythology for a second. Kaliningrad is not a fortress, it's a warehouse with a flag on it. The Baltic fleet is still there, sure, along with CS-400s and Iskanders, but their fuel, ammunition and spare parts come directly through Europe. You heard that right, through Lithuania, a NATO country specifically. If Vilnius decides to shut down transit tomorrow, Kaliningrad's military base becomes a stranded museum of rusting hardware. Just like this. When Lithuania temporarily enforced European sanctions back in 2022, panic already erupted in Moscow. It was just temporarily. Kremlin TV, for example, screamed blockade, politicians threatened nuclear attacks, and the foreign ministry demanded restoration of justice. Over what? Just what? Steel pipes, concrete building materials? That is how fragile the lifeline is, as you can see. Since then, well, nothing improved. In fact, it's now even worse. Sanctions tightened, logistics companies pulled out, prices skyrocketed. Fuel deliveries are delayed so often that local factories cut shifts to save power, which basically means less money to pay the people. Even military units complain about shortages of food and medical supplies. The so-called fortress is eating through its own walls at this point, but well, Moscow doesn't want to hear it. Instead, the government throws in patriotic concerts, Victory Day parades, and speeches about how Kaliningrad stands firm against the West. It's our first conclave. It's like watching a maniac throw fireworks on a sinking ship full of spilled gas. Meanwhile, NATO quietly watches. Poland and Lithuania have reinforced the Suwalki Gap, this narrow 65-kilometer corridor that separates Kaliningrad from Belarus. Well, they enforce them with what? Guess what? New troops and radar systems. NATO no longer even needs to attack, it just needs to wait. Geography will do the rest. Putin generals call Kaliningrad a forward post of Russia's power, while in reality it's just forward post of Russia's denial. And even locals who live there do not longer share the same views of United Russia as before. The ideology changes quickly. And being so far from the Kremlin allows them to think that they are a little bit safer than the rest of Russia. Which, in reality, if you think about it, might be true. Let's talk about it in our next chapter. Let's talk about the people, the ones who actually live there. Because the crisis is not only measured in tons of cargo or military drills, it's measured in the slow decay of everyday life. Kaliningraders are not like the rest of Russia. They grew up traveling to Gdansk for the weekend, shopping in Polish malls and studying abroad in Germany. Before 2022, more than 70% of them had Schengen visas, which allowed them to travel across entire Europe. Flights to Berlin cost less than a trip to Moscow. The region was Russia's most European in every way possible: architecture, culture, and most importantly, the mindset. What about now? They're just trapped behind a wall of their own government building. Imagine watching from your apartment window motorcades of European leaders driving to summits in nearby Vilnius or Warsaw, and just realizing that, well, you only live 200 kilometers away might very well as well be on Mars. That they used to be this bridge between Russia and Europe, well, now they're just the border, stuck between two worlds, and both of them pretends not to even see them. And resentment is growing. Not loud protest, not yet at least, because, that would be crushed in a heartbeat, unfortunately. But still there is quiet contempt towards Moscow, towards the war, towards the propaganda that tells them that they should be proud of standing up to the West, while their own fridges get emptier, somehow. 2024 local poll, which authorities obviously tried to bury, of course, showed something shocking. Over 40% of Kaliningrad residents said that they feel more European than Russians. The state called it inaccurate, but they did not deny it. And that is 40% who were brave enough to declare it. Wouldn't be surprised if the real number is double that. Something what, once again, the Kremlin will always deny and say it's Western propaganda. Well, at least not Ukrainian propaganda, right? What they will ignore, however, is the suffering and sacrifice of those Kaliningrad residents. As long as it does not affect the stability of the regime, your complaints are not valid. That is the approach. Let's talk about the total negligence of the Kremlin towards Kaliningrad in our next chapter. If you want to know how cruel irony can be, just look at the map again. In the last year alone, major international summits have taken place right next to Kaliningrad's borders. NATO gatherings in Vilnius, European defense meetings in Poland, even joint drills between Sweden and Finland. Planes full of diplomats, journalists, presidents, global decisions made literally within a 2-hour drive, the places where they used to vacation. And the people of Kaliningrad, they can only watch it on pirated news streams, read in prohibited Telegram channels, wondering how a region so close to the world could feel so completely forgotten. One local teacher put it kinda perfectly on his Telegram channel, saying that we can see Europe's lights from our coast at night, but they will not see us back. There is a new kind of psychological isolation here. The propaganda says Europe is your enemy, but daily reality says otherwise. People still listen to Polish radio, watch German YouTube channels through VPNs, follow the world that is now off limits. They hear European leaders talking about sanctions, aid, and unity, and they think to themselves, do they even remember we exist? Even Moscow barely mentions Kaliningrad anymore. When Putin gives his speeches, he lists every heroic region of Russia, Donetsk, Crimea, Belgrade, but Kaliningrad barely gets a mention ever. Maybe because it reminds him of what Russia used to dream of being: modern, open, connected. Now it is just literally a living contradiction, the most western part of the country that is sprinting back to the east. And people feel that betrayal. They used to believe they were Russia's showcase to Europe. Now they're the exhibit of how fast the image can collapse. Just imagine if North Korea gets a part of South Korea back, not all the country, but even just a small part. How soon will it be integrated into northern lifestyle? Will it keep any of its southern identity? That is pretty much exactly what is happening right now with the Kremlin slowly reeling back Kaliningrad. Economically, Kaliningrad is in free fall. It's not just some slow, invisible process, it is happening right now in real time. Factories once assembling European electronics are idle. The port's cargo turnover fell by nearly 40% since the war began. Tourism? Well, obviously that. Foreign flights suspended indefinitely. Even, once again, regional flights are more expensive. The city's hotels are half empty, surviving on state conferences and military delegations pretending to be business forums. The government tries to patch the holes by flooding the region with propaganda money, such as youth patriotism grants, cultural sovereignty programs, import substitution exhibitions, but none of these feeds people, just the oligarchs, just feeds the illusion. But locals, they do see the numbers, the real ones. The regional budget deficit tripled in 2 years. Inflation higher than the national average. Housing prices collapsed by 25%, nobody wants to live there. Even food deliveries from mainland Russia are inconsistent. sometimes delayed for days due to customs procedures. Customs procedures between Russia and Russia. Well, I know that's absurd, but this is what is happening. And so obviously the young generation started living quietly, methodically. Students apply for European universities through fake addresses in Lithuania, take an Airbnb, declare this your address, get an invitation letter, move on. Tech workers move to Armenia or Georgia. Teachers quit and open online schools abroad. The brain drain is turning into literal brain evacuation. The Kremlin pretends it's not happening, but Kaliningrad's decline is no longer a secret. You can see it in satellite photos. Empty piers, tall construction sites, ships rusting in port. The city's famous amber factories, once exporting jewelry worldwide, now produces trinkets for domestic tourists who cannot even get there easily. And every time somebody complains, well, guess what? Moscow sends a delegation. A few officials with cameras who talk about strategic importance and promise new infrastructure. And then they just fly back and, as you guessed it, nothing changes. The silence after those visits feels heavier every time, because the truth is simple. Moscow has no plan for Kaliningrad. It cannot save it without admitting the war destroyed everything that connected it to Europe. So instead, it lets it slowly suffocate, quietly enough that no one notices until it is too late. Kaliningrad disappears slowly, painfully, month by month, not from war, but from neglect, from lies, from the unbearable weight of being forgotten. Kaliningrad does not need to be conquered. It's already been abandoned. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Getting close to 276,000 and I probably can trim my beard a little bit. Let's see how it goes. If you wish to support our work, there are links down below. For example, Patreon donations help a lot. Thanks so much, guys. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on resolve they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.